Hello everyone, welcome to our learning series of how to use Unreal Engine for architectural visualization. In this video, we're going to continue talking about the cinematic production inside Unreal Engine. From our last video, we have learned how to use the basic camera setup to build a basic animation inside the level sequencer. In this video, we're going to continue learning how to set up an advanced camera movements using the camera rig crane and the camera rig rail. So to start, I'm going to create a folder, name it as Cinematic 2, and create a level sequencer inside the folder. Call this Arch Viz Animation. Alright, so before we begin, let's have a look at the camera rig and the camera rig crane and the camera rig rail and how we can set up these inside our scene. So for example, if we want to use the camera rig crane as a start, we're gonna drag it into our scene, and you'll see that the camera rig crane is similar to what is being used inside the movie industry, as it has the same setup. And over the details panel, you'll find that the crane control, the crane pitch and the crane yaw, which control the movements on both axes. So and the crane pitch, you'll find that the crane is moving on a 360 degree. Let's say, for example, from 0 to 350, for example, it's gonna do a full round around this axis. And for the yaw effect, it's gonna go onto the different axis where the camera gonna move closer to the objects. Now let's see how we're gonna set up a camera and link it to the camera rig crane and see how we can add this to the sequencer. We're gonna start by dragging a cinematic camera actor to our scene, and before we do that, we can minimize the scale of our crane a little bit, so we can bring it down to 0.7, for example, and move the camera a little bit closer to the crane, or we can do that by another way. But before doing this, as you can see, the in-picture camera and the viewport is quite a bit disturbing when we are moving the camera or when we are working inside the viewport. So we can disable this temporarily by going to the edit and the editor preference, and just type in the search details look and head to the preview selected camera under look and feel and disable it. There is no need to restart the engine, as this is just gonna disable the in-picture camera. Alright, so the first thing, we need to link the camera to the crane, and this can be done by dragging the cinematic camera to the camera rig. And now if we move the crane, you can see that the camera is moving with the crane now. Now we need to align the camera position to match the end of the crane by going to the location, selecting the camera and going to the location, and we can easily restore to default. And this is going to bring the camera location to the 0 and also for the rotation. And if we bring now split our screen as we have done earlier, so we can bring this to the camera view, or we can bring it here in the cinematic view, and this is number 19, and this is basically what the camera now is looking at. So the next step is that we're gonna see how we're gonna start to keyframe this crane movements with the camera inside our sequencer. And to start, we need to add our camera inside the sequencer. But before that, let's add our shots. So I'm gonna right click and go to the animation, add the level sequencer and name it as shot 01. And let's add another one. shot 02. And inside our sequencer, I'm gonna add a shot track. I'm gonna add shot 1, and also I'm gonna add shot 02. Okay. So we can also set up our time frame length. So let's say, for example, it's gonna be like 1500 frame. And as we have learned earlier in the previous video, if we go to the end of this frame, there's gonna be another one. So I'm just gonna duplicate this one and save it on shot 2. I just picked up another camera that I have set up earlier. So I'm gonna move the time frame to 1500 frame and then press on the set to the end. So now we have our time frame have been set up from 0 to 1500. Okay, so let's go inside shot 1. Let's basically extend this shot to 300 frame, or let's say, for example, 450, and go inside the shot. Okay, and let's say, for example, that we want the shot to end 350. We need actually to extend also the time frame here to 350, and once we click, let's move it because it was not adjusted at the beginning, so it has moved to the earlier end frame before setting the time frame. So I'm gonna extend the play timeline till the end of this time frame for shot 1. And the easy way to add our camera to the track here, to this shot 1, by selecting the camera in track, add to sequencer, and then add cinematic camera number 19. So as you can see now, if we click on the camera cuts here, this is our camera proportion according to the camera adjustments inside the settings. You can always go back and change the camera setting anytime. So let's start by adjusting our camera direction, so we can start keyframe this the crane in the camera. So I'm gonna just rotate the camera view to find a suitable spot to start the camera movement. Let's say from here, for example. And to start keying this crane, you simply choose the crane, and on the details panel on the settings, whenever you find this icon beside the setting, it means that you can keyframe this option, or this details option for the crane, for example. So let's start, for example, at frame 0 and head this position of the crane, click this icon, and we have a starting point for the crane to move in this area. And I'm gonna move the crane till the keyframe till the end of the timeline, 350, and adjust this value, for example, to 30, maybe a little bit more, let's say 370. Yeah, that should be enough, and hit the icon. And now if we want to preview our camera movement, you can see if we press on play, and this is the camera movement, and you can see on the left side here on the panel the movement of the crane. So we also want to adjust the yaw a little bit of the crane, so I'm gonna head back again to 0, and I think if I move let's say, for example, start the yaw keyframe at 0 at this point, and then move a little bit, let's say, for example, at half the way in, let's say 175 frame. I'm gonna push this crane to, let's say for example 15, on the other side actually minus 15. Yep, and then add the icon and then move it till the end of the timeline, 350, and double this number, let's say, or make it minus 20 until it become closer to the leaf. Yeah, and then hit the icon again. So now if we go back again to frame 0 and start the play from the beginning, you can see that the camera now is moving toward the direction that we have specified and both axes. Simply and easy, without any problems with losing the camera, or any problems with the manual movements of the camera. We can also adjust the camera focal length settings by choosing the camera. Let's say for example if you want to go back to our review of the camera movement that we have done, just click on the camera icon, and let's say for example we're going to choose the camera, and if we want to do this we have either the manual way, or if we activate the debug focus plane and we just increase the number, or decrease it or increase it according to your camera distance. And if I, for example, disable this now and choose to focus at this point, and this is just as additional information, you cannot choose your camera focus settings inside the cinematic view. So you're gonna have to go back and choose your camera view inside your perspective and click here, and now you have your focus settings. I'm just gonna change the current aperture a little bit. So let's say for example at this level, and let's play a little bit with this one, just a little bit like at this point. Okay, so we're gonna go to frame 0 and also click the icon next to the focal distance and the camera aperture, in case we have adjusted it also. And let's move for example to frame, let's say around 200, see how we are doing with the camera movements. So the focus now is on the leaf and the background is a little bit blurry. If we want to reverse the sequence of the focus now, we can keyframe this point and then move to the end of the frame, that is 350, and then adjust the focal length a little bit till we get the other side of the focus, and then hit the focal distance. So if we go back to our time frame from the beginning and watch how the camera move, so we have the camera moving with the focal settings, and then once it reaches to this point it's gonna change the focus setting. Alright, so let's see how we're gonna set up also the camera rig rail. I'm gonna stop this now, and let's say for example we want to move the camera rig rail inside this canopy path over here. So I'm gonna drag the camera rig rail, and basically it's also similar to what is being used in the movie production studios, where we have the rail where you gonna click this point and then just extend it. Or if for example if you want to change the direction, if you want to have a different direction, you can hit Alt and then just let's say for example we want to curve it a little bit on this side, so the camera will move according to the rail path. But we're just gonna keep it straight at this point, and I'm just gonna keep it at this point straight to this point. I'm gonna drag also another camera. The same thing, we're gonna move the camera to the rig rail to be linked to the rail, and also adjust the camera location after making sure that it's now linked to the camera rail. So again, restoring the default location of the camera. And then we're gonna go to the perspective, view our camera. We can always adjust the camera position, and now we can also adjust the focal setting of the camera, the lens setting, sorry. Let's say this, or bring it back a little bit, 50. Okay, so this one is fine for now. So if we go back to our perspective outside the camera view, the rig rail movement is basically just one direction movements. So if we go to the setting, you'll find the position is from 0 to 1. So I click, for example, 0.5. It's gonna move to the middle of the rail destination according to how we set up the length of it, or to 1, for example, till the end. And let's start, for example, to set up animation at this part. So let's move back to the master level sequencer, where we're gonna need also to add this rail to the shot 2. So before that, we need to adjust the position of shot 2. Let's say starting from 350 up to 900. Let us extend this a little bit. Alright, so we're gonna double click this and choose the camera, and then click on track, add to sequencer. We'll find our camera here, only visible if we select our camera. So now that the camera is available and now in the scene, we need to adjust also our scene, so starting from 350 up to 900 as it's been adjusted in the master level sequencer. We have to make sure that we have adjusted our shot 2 or shot 3, any shots that after shot 1, in the beginning and in the end of the frame, because sometimes this get a little bit confusing. So I'm gonna click on the camera viewport, and then go back to our screens, and then I'm gonna move the time frame here, and as you can see now, we can see our camera. We can also adjust our camera focal length again, or we can keep it as it is. And if we go back here, if we click here and go to our camera view, we can also adjust the camera movement as we prefer. So at this point, let's keep it at this, and then go to our camera crane. Sorry about that. So the camera rig rail, we're gonna move it from 350. So make sure you go back to the beginning of your shot frame and click on the position of the rail at 0, and let's move it till the end, which is 900, and make this 1, and click another keyframe. So if we move the time frame here, you can see that now we have a movement for the camera on the rail as it has been set up. Again, the same thing, we can adjust the lens setting according to the view, or you can add actually an extra cool shots where the rail is zooming in and the camera focal length is going back. Some of the cool effects that is being used in the cinematic production. So now we understand how to use the camera crane and the camera rig rail. Of course, you're not gonna use them most of the time in your shot, but it's gonna be really helpful in terms of, for example, if you have a fixed shots movements inside your project, and they are actually much better than the manual camera movements in the animation, especially in the Arch Viz Animation. So let's assume now that you have your camera shots have been set up and your keyframe is ready to be exported. You can always add extra effects if you like, especially if you don't like the post-production or the post-process effect that we have added earlier, you can always go back and you can add them manually. If you can, for example, if you look at the add to sequencer, you'll find that all of your scene objects, let's say for example post process, you can add it here and change the effects in one of the cameras, for example. But for now, let's keep it as it is in this course, but in the upcoming courses we're gonna discuss more detailed animation production, like for example we can add animations to some of the objects like moving cars or door openings, stuff like that. So let's assume now that we want to export our movie to our client to show him a basic preview of the project. We can, for example, set up this till the end of this frame, let's say 900. Okay, and we're gonna go to the production icon, and if you look here at the settings, we can render a sequence video AVI format, and choosing which custom frame rate. Let's say for example you want to produce a 4K video without any compression, but keep in mind that this will increase the size of your video, so it can become like a 50 GB or something. You can choose also a lower resolution like 9020 by 1080, or like we all prefer, export this in a sequence, so we can have an image sequence and import them later on After Effects or Adobe Premiere and start editing these sequences. Another method also, or another cool effect inside Unreal Engine, is that you can choose the custom render passes and start adding different graphic option passes from here, like the custom depth, some of the translucent effects. You can actually see these effects if we maximize this inside the buffer visualization. If you go to overview, let's maximize this a little bit, close this. I'm gonna click on F11. So as you can see, some of these passes are available here, so you can check it out before exporting your pass, like the roughness, the metallic, or the specular. You can use these passes in your final post-production inside Adobe Premiere or your preferred post-production software. So again, what we have learned in this video is to use the camera rig and the camera crane tools, so we can have a better smooth movement for the camera to set up a basic animation, so we can export it to the concerned parties, whether it's the client or your design manager, just so you can give them a look of or a progress presentation of your progress for the project. So I hope you guys have gained enough experience in this video, and again, if you have any problems, just write it down in the comments. We are planning at the end of this course to prepare a video to answer all the questions or all of the other issues that any of you have encountered during this course, so we can answer them one by one at the end of this course. Now I'm going to leave you with the animation that we have prepared for this project, so you can have a look at what we can produce, for example, from a small thing that we have developed inside our modeling software. In our case it was 3D Max, just a simple geometry, architectural geometry, nothing special. And check to see what we have done for this small project, and we are happy to see your comments. And in the next video we're gonna focus on other stuff like the variant manager, where we're gonna see a different option of this canopy, how we're gonna set up this inside our project, so we can show, for example, our clients that we can have different options for their for any specific part of the project. And also we're gonna move from there to start to set up how we're gonna establish a real-time experience and a smoother frame per second quality movements in real time, using either PC movements or a virtual reality. So I'm gonna leave you now with the video, and I hope you like it, and give us your feedbacks and on the comments. So thank you very much.